Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be back with you again for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobes, chapter 3 and 4. These chapters seem to be a little shorter than the one in the previous book, so I'm doing 2 at a time. Now, in chapter 2, the last thing that we heard was that Lucy had come back after an exciting adventure with Mr. Tumnus the Fawn, and she had come back into the wardrobe, and her last words were, she stepped into the empty room, she was calling out to the others and saying, "I'm here," she shouted. "I'm here, I've come back, I'm all right." Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other 3. "It's all right," she said, "I'm come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" said Susan. "Why," said Lucy in amazement, "haven't you all been wondering where I was?" "Oh, have you been hiding?" said Peter. "Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. "She's batty," said Edmund, tapping his head. "Quite batty." "What do you mean, Lou?" said Peter. "What I said," Lucy. "It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours, and I've had tea, and all sorts of other things have happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago ourselves, and you were in there then." "She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's just making up a story for fun, aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a fawn and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Please come and see." Others didn't know what to think, but Lucy was so excited they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and said, "Now, go in and see for yourselves." "Why, you goose," said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it." And then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of the wardrobe. And it had hooks on it. And Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure it was solid. "That was a jolly good hoax, Lou," he said as he came out. "You've really taken us in, I must admit. We half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly, it was all different a moment ago. Honestly, it was, I promise." "Come on, Lou," said Peter. "This is going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and she burst into tears. For the next few days, she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment, if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really right, and she couldn't bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, were making her very unhappy. The 2 older ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. He kept on sneering and jeering at Lucy and asking her if she'd found any other new countries in all the other cupboards in the house. What made it worse that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine. They were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, lying in the heather. But Lucy couldn't properly enjoy any of it. And so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon and there was still no sign of break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and soon they scattered around the house to hide, and Lucy went into the room where the wardrobe was. She didn't mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it, for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the fawn had been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to just have a look in the wardrobe and then hide somewhere. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She didn't shut it properly because she knew that it's a very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even not a magic one. Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it was a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and darkness, and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan come to catch her, said Edmund to himself, so she's keeping very quiet in the back. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He half expected to find her in a few seconds, and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he couldn't find the door either. He didn't like this at all, and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou, where are you? I know you're in here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you'd expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. Here's Edmund feeling his way around inside the wardrobe. He also noted that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open by its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went toward the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe. But instead of finding himself stepping into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some dark, thick fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. There was crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead, there was a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. Here's Edmund in the snow among the trees. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched away as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and how unpleasant he had been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out to not be imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere close at hand, so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy, I'm here too! Edmund!" There was still no answer. "She's angry about all the things I've been saying lately," said Edmund. And though he didn't like to admit that he was wrong, he also didn't like much being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place, so he shouted again, "I say, Lucy, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see now you were right all along. Do come out. Make peace with me." Still, there was no answer. "Just like a girl," Edmund thought to himself, "sulking about somewhere and won't accept my apology." He looked around him again and decided that he didn't much like this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home, when he heard, far off in the wood, a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sledge drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared to them. Their branching horns were gold and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet tall if he had been standing. He was dressed in a polar bear's fur And on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman Edmund had ever seen. She was also covered in white fur right up to her throat, and she held a long, straight, golden wand on her hand. And she wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not just pale, but white like snow or paper or icing, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. I bet you know who this is, don't you? The sledge was a fine sight as it came sweeping toward Edmund, with the bells jangling and the dwarf cracking his whip and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop," said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so short that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood champing at their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. Here's the sledge with the reindeer almost sitting down, and the White Queen sitting on the top, and there's Edmund. "And pray, what are you?" she said to Edmund. My name is Edmund," he said rather awkwardly. He didn't like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she said, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know," said Edmund. "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried she. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you?" Please, your majesty, I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. At least I was. But it's the holidays now." And that's the end of chapter 3. Let's go on to chapter 4, shall we? This chapter's called Turkish Delight. "But what are you?" said the queen. "Are you a great overgrown dwarf that has cut off his beard?" No, your majesty. I never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy?" she said. "Do you mean that you are a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, not saying anything. He was too confused by this time to understand what that question meant. "I see you're an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the queen. "Answer me once and for all, or I will lose my patience. Are you human?" "Yes, your majesty." "And how, my child, did you come to enter my dominions?" "Please, your majesty, I came in through a wardrobe." "A wardrobe? What do you mean?" "I opened a door and just found myself here, your majesty," said Edmund. "Ha," said the queen, speaking more to herself than to him. A door from the world of men. I've heard of such things, and this may wreck all. But he's only one, and he's easily dealt with." As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked at Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming. At the same time, she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure that she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for lost, she appeared to change her mind. "My poor child," she said in quite a different voice, "how cold you look. Come up here and sit with me on the sledge, and I'll put my cloak around you and we'll talk." Edmund didn't like this arrangement at all, but he dared not disobey. He stepped onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur cloak around him and tucked it in. "Perhaps something hot to drink?" said the queen. "Would you like that?" "Yes, please, your majesty," said Edmund, whose teeth were chattering. The queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a small bottle, which looked as if it were made of copper, and then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall from it onto the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second, in midair, shining like a diamond. But the moment it touched the snow, there was a hissing sound, and there stood a jeweled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately picked this up and handed it to Edmund, with a bow and a smile. Not a very nice smile. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before, very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. "It's dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating," said the queen presently. "What do you like best to eat?" "Turkish delight, please, your majesty," said Edmund. The queen let another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with a green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Do you know what Turkish delight is? Let me show you. Here's a box of Turkish delight, and maybe you can see from the picture on there that it's little squares of sort of jelly-like candy with a powder all around the outside of it, and it's dark red in the middle because it's flavored with rose fragrance. And evidently during those war years, as I'd mentioned once before, candies were very hard to come by, and Turkish delight came from the Middle East, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, places like that. I'm just looking to see where this is made. This is made in Turkey. That's good, isn't it? It's the real thing. And this is what it looks like. Maybe I can hold it up so you can see. It's little squares. They're kind of squishy. Can you see I'm squeezing them? And they're red inside. And I would take a bite of it and show you what it looks like inside, but to tell you the truth, I really don't like it at all. But never mind, at least now you know what it is, and I've got powder all over me. I thought maybe it was powdered sugar, but it's not. It's not sweet at all. I don't know if it's flour or what it is. Anyway, there you are. There's Turkish delight. And if you can imagine, I've just got 3 tiny pieces on my little dish here, but maybe you can imagine that that's a great big box and it's got several pounds worth in there. My little box here only has less than half of 1 pound in it. So several pounds would be a whole heap of Turkish delight, wouldn't it? All right, let's go on. The queen let another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with a green silk ribbon, which, when opened, was found to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Each piece was sweet and light to the very center, and Edmund had never tasted anything so delicious. He was quite warm now and very comfortable. While he was eating, the queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it's rude to talk with your mouth full, but soon he forgot about this and only tried to think about how many pieces of Turkish delight he could shovel into his mouth at once. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat. And he never asked himself why the queen should be so inquisitive. She got him to tell her that he had 1 brother and 2 sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and had met a faun there, and that no one except himself and his brother and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them, and she kept on coming back to it. "You are sure that there are just 4 of you?" she said. "2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, neither more nor less?" And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, kept on saying, "Yes, I told you that before," and forgetting to call her Her Majesty. But she didn't seem to mind now. At last, the Turkish delight was all finished. And Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she would ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was enchanted Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted of it would want more and more of it, and would even, if they were allowed, go on eating it until they killed themselves. But she did not offer him any more. Instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to see your brothers and sisters. Will you bring them to see me?" "I'll try," said Edmund, still looking at that empty box. "Because if you did, bringing them with you, of course, I'd be able to give you more Turkish delight. I can't do it now. The magic will only work once, but in my own house, it would be a different matter." "Well, why can't we go to your house right now?" said Edmund. When he had first gotten onto the sledge, he had been afraid that she might drive away with him to some unknown place from which he would not be able to get back, but he had forgotten that fear now. "Oh, it's a lovely place, my house," said the Queen. "I'm sure you would like it. There are whole rooms full of Turkish delight. And what's more, I have no children of my own. I want a nice boy that I could bring up as a prince and who would be king of Narnia when I'm gone. While he was prince, he would wear a gold crown and eat Turkish delight all day long. And you are much the cleverest and handsomest young man I have ever seen. I think I would like to make you the prince some day when you bring the others to visit me." "Why not now?" said Edmund. His face had become very red, and his mouth and fingers were sticky. He did not look either clever or handsome, whatever the Queen might say. "Oh, but if I took you there now," she said, "I wouldn't get to see your brother and sisters. I very much want to meet your charming relations. You are to be prince, and later on the king. That is understood, but you must have courtiers and nobles. I will make your brother a duke and your sisters duchesses." "There's nothing special about them," said Edmund. "And anyway, I can always bring them another time." "Ah, but once you're in my house," said the Queen, "you might forget all about them. You would be enjoying yourself so much that you wouldn't want to bother to fetch them. No, you must go back to your own country now and come to me another day with them. You understand, it's no good coming without them." "But I don't even know the way back to my own country," said Edmund. "Oh, that's easy," said the Queen. "Do you see that lamp?" And she pointed with her wand, and Edmund turned and saw the same lamppost under which Lucy had met the fawn. "Go straight on beyond that way into the world of men. And now look the other way." And she pointed in the opposite direction. "And tell me, can you see two little hills rising among the trees?" "I think I can," said Edmund. "Well, my house is between those two hills. So next time you come, you only have to find the lamppost and then look for those two hills and walk through the wood until you reach my house. But remember, you must bring the others with you." I might have to be very angry with you if you come alone." "I'll do my best," said Edmund. "And by the way," said the Queen, "you needn't tell them about me. It would be fun to keep it a secret between the two of us, don't you think? Just bring them along, make it a surprise. A clever boy like you will easily think of some excuse for doing that, and when you come to my house, you could just say, 'Let's see who lives here,' or something like that. I'm sure that would be best. And if your sister has met one of the fawns, she might have heard some strange stories about me. Nasty stories might make her afraid to come to me. Fawns will say anything, you know. And now, please, please," said Edmund, "couldn't I have just one more piece of Turkish delight to eat on my way home?" "Oh, no," said the Queen with a laugh. "You must wait until next time." When she spoke, she signaled to the dwarf to drive on. But as the sledge swept away out of sight, the Queen waved to Edmund and said, next time, don't forget, come soon." Edmund was still staring after the sledge when he heard someone calling his name, and looking around, he saw Lucy coming toward him from another part of the wood. "Oh, Edmund," she said, "you got in too. Isn't it wonderful? And now—" "All right," said Edmund. "I see you were right, and it is a magic wardrobe after all. I'll say I'm sorry if you like, but where on earth have you been all this time? I've been looking for you everywhere." "Well, if I had known you had gotten in, I would have waited for you. who was too happy and too excited to notice how snappish Edmund was, or how flushed and strange his face was. "I've been having lunch with dear Mr. Tumnus the fawn, and he's very well, and the White Witch has done nothing to him for letting me go, so he thinks that she can't have found out. It's going to be all right after all." "The White Witch?" said Edmund. "Who's she?" "She's a perfectly terrible person," said Lucy. "She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, though she has no right to be queen at all. And all the fauns and the dryads and the naiads and the dwarves and the animals, at least all the good ones, they all simply hate her. And she can turn people into stone and do all kinds of horrible things. And she has made magic so that it's always winter in Narnia and never gets to be Christmas. She drives around on a sledge drawn by reindeer, and she has a wand in her hand and a crown on her head." Edmund was already feeling uncomfortable from having eaten too many sweets, and when he heard that the lady he had made friend with was dangerous, he felt even more uncomfortable. But he still wanted to taste more Turkish delight, and he wanted that more than he wanted anything else. "Who told you all that stuff about the White Witch?" he asked. "Mr. Tumnus the fawn." "You can't believe what fawns say," said Edmund, trying to sound as if he knew far more about them than Lucy. "Well, who says so?" said Lucy. "Everybody knows it," said Edmund. "Ask anybody you like. But hey, it's not very good standing here in the snow. Let's go home." "Oh, yes, let's. Oh, Edmund, I'm so glad you got in here, too. The others will have to believe in Narnia now that both of us have been there. What fun it will be." But Edmund secretly thought that it wouldn't be half as much fun for him as it would be for her. He would have to admit that Lucy was right before all the others. And he felt sure that the others would be on the side of the fawns and the animals, and he was already more than halfway on the side of the witch. He didn't know what he would say or how he would keep his secret once they were all talking about Narnia. By this time they had walked a good way, but suddenly they felt coats around them instead of branches, and the next minute they were both standing outside the wardrobe in the empty room. "I say," said Lucy, "you look awful, Edmund. Don't you feel well?" "I'm all right," said Edmund, but this was not true. He was feeling very sick. "Come on then," said Lucy. "Let's find the others. What a lot we shall have to tell them, and what wonderful adventures we shall have now that we're all in it together." And that is the end of chapter 4. Please come back again when we read chapter 5, Back on This Side of the Door. I hope we'll get together then. Bye for now, everybody. Love to you.